Come one, come all, and listen to a tale. As Morgan looks upon the burning train, he and Boondock see Juliet in the distance, still in fox form, riding back with an unfazed Hops. Boondock carries a passed-out Essen as the party once again is reunited. However, the peace is not to last as one of the bandits, Titus, pulls a gun on Boondock, telling them they desperately need the bounty on Boondock's head. Boondock stares Titus down and, quick as a flash, blows off Titus's hand in one clean shot. Titus curses as Boondock cocks the shotgun and levels it at Titus, giving him an ultimatum. Either Titus goes back with Boondock as a prisoner, or Boondock executes him right here and now in the desert. Titus, defeated, reluctantly agrees as Boondock patches up his hand, ties him and the rest of the bandits up, and gets ready for the long trek through the desert to Hope's Landing. Essen wakes up at this point, visibly shaken from his experience, but resolves to travel with the party as he is also planning to visit the Oracle. Without a horse, he decides to try and ride with someone else, and seeing a fox atop a dark brown steed, he tries to move the fox aside so he can ride it. The fox barks at him angrily and gestures for him to ride in the back, and he obliges. The party loads their gear and is ready to head out to Hope's Landing, but are unable to find Juliet. After briefly looking around, they decide to cut their losses and start heading out, and Juliet angrily changes back into a human form, cursing at the party for being so willing to ditch her. The ride to Hope's Landing is fairly quiet. As Juliet steers the horse, Essen idly begins to play with Juliet's tail, pissing Juliet off in the process. Essen apologizes and then asks if he can touch Juliet's tail. Juliet is standoffish at first, but seeing the Air Genasi in distress, she relents and allows him to pet her. As the adventurers continue on their journey, they travel through a canyon with the heat bearing down on them. In the distance, they can see a crashed and abandoned caravan. Ignoring the fact that this could be a trap, Juliet nearly dives in before Boondock stops her, during which Hops uses her long tongue as a lasso to grab one of the boxes. Juliet pilfers through the box and finds a whip with sakura blossoms on it, when all of a sudden, the ground starts to shake and tremble. From the ground appears a giant insectoid creature known as an antlion. The party immediately springs into action and, after Hops manages to stun the creature, it is easily taken down. After they successfully tear the monster apart, Juliet decides to pilfer through the last of the remaining goods in the abandoned carts. There, she finds a glowing purple katana with a golden edge on the blade and chainmail armor. Already experienced with katanas, Juliet gives the whip to Essen and the armor to Boondock. Juliet starts to test out the blade for herself. In doing so, she realizes that this katana, which she renamed Purple Ghost, has another feature. In her left hand appears an ethereal kunai, which, when thrown, appears right back into her hand. Essen, deciding to test out his new weapon as well, cracks the whip, scattering sakura petals in the air. Juliet, amused at this display, begins to bat at the petals in midair. But, to her shock, the petals explode into brilliant flames, as Essen rightfully renames the weapon the Sakura Snap. As night falls, the party decides to rest in the canyon, climbing up on a cliffside to get a better view. The party splits into watches. Hops and Boondock take the first. Boondock talks to the bandits, wondering why the hell they would try and assassinate them. Titus remains silent, as the other two bandits explain that some of their family members had to turn to a life of crime to put food on the table. Because of this, Boondock eventually jailed their family, or executed them. Boondock is somewhat sympathetic to the bandits' plight, but they tell the bandits that
everyone in Hope's Landing is struggling to get by making an honest living. It just plain ain't fair to take from other folk, no matter the reason.
Boondock sighs, breaks out his guntar, and spends the rest of the watch playing a quiet ditty. Essen and Juliet are the next shift, and start to chat to get to know one another. Juliet is a bit confused as to why he is so clingy to her when they had just first met, to which Essen explains that he hadn't had physical touch from another person in a very long time. Pushing through her normal tsundere facade, Juliet decides to give the poor Air Genasi a hug to attempt to make him feel better. As she does, Essen begins to weep, unused to this display of affection. Juliet is confused but tells Essen, "What the hell are you crying for? Crying is for damsels," as she helps wipe away his tears and comfort him before the next watch starts. Morgan is the last watch, and he decides to ask Titus why he needed all that money. Titus finally explains, after much pestering from Morgan, that he needs the bounty for his sister's surgery. His sister, Petunia, is sick with a rare disease that no standard healer can cure. Morgan offers to pay for the surgery, leaving Titus wondering what Morgan's intentions are. Titus questions Morgan further and finds out that Morgan has no ulterior motive for helping him. Morgan just wants to do it because Titus's sister needs help. This genuine act of kindness leaves Titus dumbfounded as the sun begins to rise and the party is off once again towards Hope's Landing. Riding into Hope's Landing, the party splits into 3 groups. Hops, who needs to be submerged in water as she begins to dry out, goes with Boondock to see his mother and also to wet herself in the oasis that is the heart of the town. As Hops gratefully jumps into the water, we meet Ma Boondock, who is thrilled to see her child back safe and sound. Boondock asks if there's been any trouble since they've been gone. Ma then points to where 2 bandits, who had the intent to take over the oasis, are sitting, tied up and wounded. Grinning at Boondock as she says, "Only problem I've had is the sight of my rifle might be off. Took me 3 shots to capture a pair of idiots instead of the normal 2. Boondock returns the grin and wraps up Ma in a tight hug. Meanwhile, Essen decides to follow Juliet to the nearest bar. As they head inside, they look around and see that it's the most depressing bar Juliet has ever been to. She walks up to the bartender, whose name is Mama, to ask why the bar is so down. Mama then explains that they had some run-ins with the Hydra gang that's been causing terror and grief for the town. Deciding that the bar needs some livening up, Juliet finds a piano and starts to play classical songs, since that's all she really knows how to play. Essen manages to help her play a more western-y tune and tries to join in by singing, but is unfortunately tone-deaf, with Juliet having to sing over him as to not cause the patrons more grief. The bar starts to liven up a little, as Juliet decides to challenge the nearest patron with the most drinks around them to a drinking contest. That patron just so happens to be Festus, a raggedy fellow with a bushy beard who nobody can understand clearly. After 1 drink, Festus is down for the count, which encourages others to also challenge the rowdy foxwoman. As this is happening, Essen decides to try and ask the other patrons more questions about the Hydra gang. He tries to convince a few people to talk, but people are tight-lipped as he goes from person to person. As he asks a burly-looking man for information, the burly man ignores Essen's questions before excusing himself and leaving the bar. As this happens, Juliet has gotten progressively more drunk and decides to help Essen in his interrogation by seeing if she could seduce a man for information. She drunkenly stumbles over to a man, nearly headbutting him as she tries to lean near him. The man is off-put by this attempt, slowly backing up into a wall as Juliet now has him cornered. In a flash, she tries to flirtily plant her foot near his head, but instead kicks a hole into the wall. The man is now shaking, worried Juliet will hurt him as Juliet asks if he's a part of the Hydra gang. The man quickly rolls up his sleeves, explaining that every Hydra member has a snake tattoo on their wrists. Juliet, satisfied with this information, drunkenly stumbles away towards Essen as the man lets out a huge sigh of relief. Morgan heads to the shop to buy ammo for his guns. The shopkeeper suspiciously looks at Morgan, clearly having never seen him in town before. As Morgan goes up to ask for ammo, the shopkeeper clearly looks for any tattoos on Morgan's wrists. And, after finding none, the shopkeeper gives him an exorbitant price. Morgan is saddened, and instead decides to buy scrap metal instead so he can make his own. The party regroups to share what they've all learned, and as soon as Morgan states the ammo in the shop is overpriced, Boondock decides to head out to investigate. Boondock tries to intimidate the man into giving more reasonable prices, but the shopkeeper doesn't budge. At this point, Juliet drunkenly stumbles in, gets up in the man's face, and screams at him for his scummy business practices. He finally relents and admits that the Hydras have been threatening him, telling him to mark the prices up for any non-Hydra members. The shopkeeper tells them there's rumors of a Hydra base north of town, and to stop them before they bleed the town dry. Boondock agrees to take on the task when the party hears a gunshot from outside. They rush outside to see Reverend Salt and the burly man Essen met in the bar outside. The burly man has a coach gun and is standing over a dead body. Reverend Salt turns to face the party, taunting Boondock by telling them he didn't know they made it back into town. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, which are linked in the description. We also currently have a Draw This in Your Style competition open, details on our Instagram page. If you like our content, please consider supporting us on Patreon, also linked in the description.